Once again, I want to thank our two human rights defenders from the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Artsakh, Arman Tatoyan and Artak Beglaryan, for honoring our invitation and being here on such short notice. Thank you for being here. I'll let Garo Ghazarian, the moderator, take it from here. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Giro. Ladies and gentlemen, the two gentlemen seated to my left no longer need any introduction to any of us this weekend, and I'm going to not read or reflect on their biographies, their short biographies, which are in the materials provided. Nor am I going to recite their CVs, which, upon receiving them, they well exceeded 10, 12 pages each. What I would like to do very briefly is tell you who these two warriors are. I'm going to start with the first presenter, Arman Tatoyan. We met Arman Tatoyan with the Armenian Bar Association, and I personally, on a more intimate, one-on-one basis, during one of our trips to Armenia and Artsakh, and Ruben Melikian, a member of our association, who was serving as the human rights defender, the Ombudsman of Artsakh, said, of all the people, Garo, you and the association are meeting with, who you really need to meet with is the Ombudsman of Armenia. Well, I told Ruben, I said, not really, I beg to differ, because Armenia, with Arman Tatoyan, now has its fourth human rights defender, and I had met two of his predecessors, and I didn't see a need to meet them again or meet that institution or its representative again. In prior occasions, whether it was parliamentary elections or presidential elections of 2013, that office woefully fell short of its mission. It terribly let down the people of Armenia when it did not voice decisively that which it observed vis-a-vis the massive election fraud and campaign violations that took place prior to the election and during the day of elections and presidential elections of February 2013. But Ruben is not someone who says things very lightly, and he's a dear brother of ours. So I agreed to meet with Arman Tatoyan, and we met at the Marriott. I believe Carnegie was with me as well, and a couple of others. I think Giro may have been with me. Arman was with me. We sat down and we had a discussion. And after that discussion, every week, sometimes every day of the week, we have had continuing discussions with Arman Tatoyan. Arman Tatoyan is an unusual fellow. When I looked at his biography and I looked at his CV, I wasn't satisfied because there weren't those details that I long for, so many of us long for. So I wanted to know where he was from. So I wrote all that stuff. His grandparents were from Alashkir. Now, of course, I don't know, I don't profess to be an expert on Western Armenia, but I came to find out it is in Western Armenia. I also came to know that he spent 5 years working and studying in Ukraine. I came to know he worked at the United Nations. I didn't know he was Deputy Justice Minister. I didn't know he spoke several languages, Russian, and let me tell you what other was that I wrote that, or what was that? Russian, English, Ukrainian, and studying French now. But what always amazes me about Arman Tatoyan is that before what you heard at the luncheon, before this described Velvet Revolution, and after, he has been the human rights defender of Armenia. He's been on that post since 2016, And I believe he doesn't get enough credit, nor does his institution gets enough credit, that one of the main reasons why blood was not shed or skulls were not cracked, unlike every other major turn of event in Armenia, including presidential elections, and prior to that, all the other significant events, is because he wasn't afraid to speak. Because his office has been, his staff, 100, now it's 110, had been on the ground each and every day. People were gathered at the squares and the corners of the city and the countryside. Literally. And when you're not afraid to speak truth to truth, you become the example of that which transcends politics. Human rights transcending politics is the most enormous challenge of our times, especially for our homeland. And the administration of the Republican Party of Armenia leaving power, and a new party of My Step, I suppose they call it in English, coming into power and keeping the human rights defender from the prior regime into the new government is a testament to the integrity, is a testament to the spirit of what a human rights defender ought to be. My relationship with Arman is very personal. I'm not going to get into the fact that he has influenced my daughter to, instead of becoming a lawyer and being a criminal defense attorney, she now wants to be a human rights lawyer because she interned last summer, at Arman's office. I'm going to let Arman speak and speak candidly because I haven't yet seen him hide the ball. Arman Tatoyan, please stand.
Thank you very much, Karajan. Thank you very much. I've just heard so many things about me. This was even maybe something new for me, but thank you very much for this presentation and for this very warmly hosting us. And it is a great pleasure for me to be here to participate in this very important conference and to have the possibility, opportunity to present to your attention the work that I do and my views on the challenges that now our country faces, and also the transition period, the democratic transition period, the challenges, apparently we have them. But before that, let me very briefly provide you with some information about our institution. So this is the national human rights institution of our country, the only one with a wide mandate, and it is established in 2004. And I started my career actually from this office. So when I graduated, it was just established, and I went to work there. And I worked there till 2007. So I remember how hard the work was, because we had each time to take the law with us, visiting any institution, because authorities could think that we are a private corporation or some private agency and would not open definitely the door for us. So now the institution is an established one already. And it enjoys an A status. I must clarify that all human rights institutions in the world, United States of America, fortunately or unfortunately, does not have this institution, but almost all countries of the world, they do have this kind of institution, and there are certain grades. And these institutions get their accreditation from United Nations High Commissioner's Office, well, independent commission, let's say, but operating under this very honorable office. And we have an A status institution. We are an A status institution. This is the highest grade. About 1/3 of countries in the world enjoy this status. The human rights defender of Armenia is elected. I was elected by the parliament and was nominated by the parliament. This is an absolutely independent official, guided by the constitution, laws, and international treaties. it covers all public institutions in the country except for courts, and also some private organizations provided by the law, basically providing utility, let's put it this way, services to the population. There are certain guarantees. This is the most protected institution, the highly protected institution in the country. There is no removal procedure for the human rights defender. And there is a universal immunity, literally the same as members of the parliament enjoy. There's a financial independence. And also, which is very important, there are certain guarantees and immunities related to the possible criminal prosecution, search, etc., and so forth. So everything is put under the control, or let's say the consent of the National Assembly of Armenia. And this is what makes us, or the office, let's say, very strong. And also, of course, there is a ban, there is a restriction to question the human rights defender, to require any explanations, etc. But these guarantees were only provided to the human rights defender himself or herself. So when I commenced my duties in 2016, all of a sudden I received immediately almost an official letter from the Special Investigation Service of Armenia. My staff, some days ago, prior to that letter, discovered a torture case in one of the prisons. So we sent this case to the prosecution authorities with the requesting criminal prosecution. And then I received a letter from the Special Investigation Service claiming or requiring the names of my staff who revealed this case. So the purpose for me was apparent. So the purpose was to call my staff members and to question them about the notion, about the case. But of course, I didn't let this happen, and I sent a letter to the Special Investigation Service rejecting this request, and immediately I initiated an amendment to amend our law and to provide certain immunities also to my staff. Because the goal for me was apparent. The goal of this norm of the guarantee is not to protect the defender himself physically, but to protect the information that we receive in prisons, in different closed institutions, because literally we visit any institution. There are no closed doors for us in the country. So now it is established at the level of constitutional law. By the way, in the country there are 7 constitutional laws. One out of them is the law on human rights defender, which keeps us more protected. And this is a very unique regulation, even worldwide. We are the most unique institution among our colleagues in the world. So it is forbidden or prohibited, the law prohibits questioning my staff members or anyone whom could the human rights defender hire for any purpose. There is only one exclusion, one possibility, if there is the written agreement of the ombudsman. A new crime also was established, a new criminal liability for restricting access to any place under our competence. So if I send my representative to any place and the head of institution or someone else decides not to let my staff members enter into this institution, this is already a crime, so I can already file a motion and with the request to launch a criminal prosecution. This is how this institution works. There are 2 fundamental directions of work. This is investigation of individual complaints and cases, and work at the systemic level, so to shape the human rights system, to contribute to the improvement of legal system. So how we act. Our work, my activities would be senseless and just, an end in itself if I could investigate only the cases, and this could be my ultimate goal, let's say. That is why each time we analyze the roots of these cases, of the complaints, and we fight against these roots that are the reasons for violation. So in other words, this is a preventive work. And here we also conduct, especially for the last years, very active work, extensive work in the area of human rights education. This is our constitutional function. Awareness raising for example, to fight against stereotypes, training public authorities, work with media, civil society. Because sometimes in our country, you have problems with reforms, delays with reforms, because of lack of knowledge. I mean, the public at large. Stereotypes, such as women's rights protection, such as prevention of domestic violence, etc. For example, when we are active in the area of domestic violence prevention, people very often would assume this as we are trying to destroy our families. But in reality, you know, my goal, of course, is to protect family values, which is very important, and traditions. But when we have violence, then definitely I don't think that it is worth to talk about a strong family. That is why our goal is to work with society, with public authorities, to help the government and the country generally to undertake these reforms. And of course, as I told you, there are no limitations in terms of visiting any institution. And what was the very important thing? Our institution is one of the unique institutions in the world that enjoys direct international convention mandates. So we have 3 international convention mandates. The first one is the strongest one, is the National Preventive Mechanism. So this is a mechanism for preventing torture in the country. We are the national agency under the UN Child Rights Convention, and we are the national agency under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And also the Ombudsman, apart from working, let's say, at the institutional level, contributing to human rights education, we also have the possibility to initiate the right of legislative kind of change. And there is also the possibility, we very much work also with the judiciary. I have the possibility to apply to the Constitutional Court. And we also provide amicus briefs to the Constitutional Court, which is very important. And by the way, we are already developing international best experience. So we are already a third party in a case pending before the European Court of Human Rights. By the way, please pay attention to the very specific nuance. This is a case against Armenia, and we are third party in a case against Armenia. We are a state institution. This is not a government, but we are against our government to protect our citizens in a European Court of Human Rights, which highly contributed to the development of our work. And we also assess the execution of European Court of Human Rights judgments and provide special communications to the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, which keeps us again to be a pioneer institution among our colleagues. And as just to make a small addition, there are literally no closed institutions for us when it comes to an institution where a person may be held against his will. Like, for example, these are not only, of course, like classical ones like prisons, arrest, detention facilities, etc., but also psychiatric establishments, social care homes, orphanages, any place where a person, and we have the list open, any place where a person can be deprived of his liberty based on the decision of a public authority. And very recently, by the way, we had a case when the police detained the person and they took the person to the nearest hotel because they wanted to treat him not badly, let's say. And of course, we entered that hotel because we received a call and it was under our direct, let's say, competence. And as just was provided, we are also very active in trying to be very active in the whole system of the country, the legal system. So, and there is only basically one institution. This is the Parliament, to whom I report to, and this is in the form of annual report, and we have established cooperation with all the parliamentarians. And of course, we were very active during the last year's events, which was the main guarantee to keep our work effective, let's say, and to protect our citizens' rights. It took several directions, of course. First one was the monitoring of peaceful demonstrations, monitoring of police activities, investigation of police violations, human rights education, and awareness raising, improvement of the human rights system of the country. Because after that, for example, I applied to Constitutional Court of Armenia, trying to protect the legal security, how we call it in Armenia, of our country. Now, very briefly, I want to describe some of the violations. For example, a systemic problem in Armenia is related to the stage. When a person is taken from the street to the police station, this is the most vulnerable stage in our country. And I remember when we were visiting, and I personally was visiting police stations, prisons, etc., and having interview with our citizens and our applicants. These interviews and our activities there brought us to the idea that, you know, when police restricts or let's say limits the rights of our citizens, usually they refer to the nature of proceedings. Let's say this is, for example, they may say that this is administrative proceeding and not a criminal proceeding, so no need for certain rights. But our notion or our concept is that it does not matter what is the formal name of proceedings. You have to look at the content. If a person is deprived of his liberty, de facto, so that person has to follow the will of a police officer and cannot leave certain place without the permission of a police officer, then definitely the person is considered one who is deprived of liberty, and consequently he enjoys certain rights. How we say it in Armenia, these are very close to Miranda rules that exist in America, so we call it minimum rights of a person who is deprived of liberty, right to lawyer, etc. And a common violation also was related to the situations when people were being kept longer in police custody. Let's say they're taken for 3 hours within administrative detention, but you could have them longer. The reasoning, there was also another reason, that there are no administrative resources to let them go within 3 hours, because they have to take some notes, some formal registration, etc. But again, our approach was, this is not the person's fault that the police does not have enough resources. So if the time is up, then definitely the person, the police or any other public agency must let the person go. So these are the violations basically. And there were lots of other violations. We were day and night monitoring. I established from the very first moment 12 working groups working with night shifts. And we had to work each and every day. Even there were days when my staff had to stay in a police station the whole day, because it was senseless to call them back from police station, because all the police stations were full of people. Let's say, this was our task and the goal, to be there to help. And even lawyers, even often they prefer to call us rather than trying to get access to their clients, because we had this possibility to ensure their entrance to the certain police stations, which again was very important for us, because we very closely follow the work of our lawyers, attorneys, because this raises our credibility of work, and it raises also our reputation among lawyers and attorneys. And I must read out just a very important thing which I prepared, and the principles of work. And this whole experience showed that a very crucial element of effective work for the national human rights institution is to have trust of all parties involved, and to make sure that everyone perceives the institution, and of course the human rights defender personally, as impartial and depoliticized. During the developments in Armenia, I was personally in touch with the leaders of movement, authorities of that period, civil society actors, and international partners. This helped concentrate the main information and be in the center of developments. The human rights defender was also largely providing proper awareness-raising information to the public at large. During the whole period of assemblies and demonstrations, our task as the national human rights institution was to guide the human rights protection process, to provide advice and recommendations to all parties, ensuring maximum level of publicity and openness. The main purpose, of course, was to take maximum efforts to make sure that all the processes are peaceful and there is no violence or threats to freedom of expression, no calls for violence, provocations, hate speech, especially in social media. Here I want to especially stress that social media indeed plays crucial role in democratic societies. Armenian developments are one of the examples how, of course, social media can and general enjoyment of peaceful assemblies are interconnected and contribute to the development of democratic society. Unfortunately, there were registered cases of hate speech and insulting speech in social media, and that led to an atmosphere of intolerance in general. Fake profiles and rapidly opened groups with rapidly increasing followers in social media were another challenge. Our monitoring showed that the main amount of hate speech and intolerance was being generated by these profiles and groups. For instance, using cases of violation by police, and this growing tendency could play a serious negative role by harming the peaceful process. What I highly appreciated, and I was praising publicly, the approach of the leaders of movement, who were always calling to behave peacefully and to avoid any insulting speech and violence. My close contact with the leaders of the movement was a unique possibility to share concerns on the matter. I must say even that this was, of course, a confidential sometimes contact, even like literally saying I was receiving on WhatsApp or Viber the names of the people who are apprehended to the police stations and who are in need of our protection. And April, which is very important also, specific cooperation was established with state authorities of that period to make sure that the society received credible information from them. Cooperation with the press and civil society organizations also highly contributed to the peaceful process. There are several expert councils adjunct to the human rights defender. They are comprised of independent experts and civil society, members with whom we constantly discussed events taking place in the country. All of this work would not have results, of course, without our cooperation with international partners. You know, the human rights defender or the ombudsman is a very unique institution. You have to have contacts directly with all parties, literally saying all parties, even conflicting parties. This is the civil society, the state, and there is a very famous principle to be equally trusted, which is very important. And of course, when you have also reputation within international society, your partners, then it also makes the government very careful, let's say, when talking to you or speaking with you, which is very important. I know all the way around. When international partners see that you have access to the government, you can work with authorities, then they keep close contacts with you to provide their possible recommendations and then to reach the implementation of these recommendations. And now generally let me just very briefly focus on some challenges that I think the country faces. First of all, of course, this is independence of judiciary, which is very urgent now in the country, and the country is pending now. I mean, the reforms are pending, and in the country is in the stage of reforms. The judiciary, there are serious problems, I think, within the judiciary. Problems related to corruption, problems related to reputation generally. Some of the judges, I do think that they harm the judiciary, generally, the reputation of the judiciary. There is a lack of trust towards the judiciary. There has been lack of trust even before, of course, before last year's events. But I think everything should be done, must be done, in line, strictly in line with the Constitution and the law. Having the very important principle, the most important one probably, of the independence of judiciary, which is very important. One of the challenges that we face now in the country, of course, is social media and the intolerance, the level of intolerance that we have in social media. You know, sometimes people even do not go deep into the content of some let's say, interview or statement, which is another problem because they may, and also we work here very much with media, trying to urge them also to call on them to remove these comments or even to formulate the headings that would not contribute to the general atmosphere of intolerance. Fight against corruption. This is very important, and I must say that this area, The human rights defender is very largely involved in this area. First of all, of course, human rights affect, corruption affects human rights, definitely. But the human rights defender is a member of the council adjunct to the prime minister fighting against corruption. There's a new anti-corruption agency which is going to be established, and the human rights defender is one of the officials that has the right to provide candidates for board members. And we very much closely work, we are closely working now with our international partners, with Council of Europe, to effectively fight against corruption. Protection of business. This is also one of our main goals, which is very important. And here we protect, of course, business. Let's say of course, the country has problems in terms of tax bureaucracy of tax authorities, customs authorities, and here we very much we keep our close contacts, strong contacts with our business partners, let's say private companies, and I think the trust that we have, the trust that there is in us is growing and growing. The penitentiary system, generally prisons, closed institutions. Here also we have, I think, huge challenges. You know, years and years, this area has been abandoned, which is another problem. We used the country, actually, there was the legal system was, you know, in a way that the country was used to keep prisoners without proper work with them, let's say, that could be done to prepare them for freedom, to prepare them for normal life, regular life, after their release. But, you know, rather it was keeping them, it still keeps them 24 hours a day in a cell. I mean, 1 hour is for outdoor exercise. But they keep, there are no works, psychological works with them, there is no preparation, which is a problem. This is of systemic nature. And our penitentiary system still has the punitive nature and not the restorative nature, let's say. A very important component of our work is our oversight in psychiatric establishments, social care homes, etc. Yeah, first of all, and let me also to add something, that there are several principles that we are now, we work with the government to implement. This is the trust towards the prisoner, the presumption of trust towards the prisoner or any person that is in a closed institution. This is the principle of individual risk assessment, which I think that, and I think that these principles, or implementation of these principles, strengthening the early conditional release system could help, you know, improve the country. Because of the lack of this system, it led to a situation, this lack of this system, when amnesty, for example, has already an artificial significance. So people are waiting for amnesty, for example, after the last year's event, you know, which is a mechanical thing, or which is a problem, because, for example, because of last year's amnesty, the level of crimes in Armenia raised, because there was no assessment. People just were waiting because there was an overcrowding in prisons, and which led to another problem. I will, because of limited time, I will just also very briefly stop on some rights of some of the groups of society. Women's rights. This is a very important area of our work. Now, when I'm back to Yerevan, when I go back to Yerevan, we will start a 6-month campaign, very extensive campaign aimed at women's rights protection, education of girls, awareness raising of their rights, and prevention of domestic violence. We very often use also help of celebrities. You will see probably in the news that we have already prepared certain video materials with specific messages to the society, trying to break stereotypes. Because here we do have stereotypes, and we mostly will concentrate on regions, which is very important. And we use very often modern technologies. Like, for example, you will see, we will launch it, it is officially already, it operates officially. I got the official permission from Facebook. in a messenger. There would be an electronic legal advisor. We are preparing a talking website, which is a new one, completely new one. There is an intranet system and some other things which are very important. And we will have talking posters. Like let's say, if to bring a concrete example, you probably know Makati Chaurzumayan, Mako, it's like from Karkin Habuko. And there will be our celebrities and there will be some other people who will be working with us. And we also very much work with children who are in institutions to protect their rights, to protect people who are in orphanages, who are in specific institutions, because the problem with our country, starting from the Soviet Union, was always, or the case was always that we always were isolating these people from the society. People who have some, specific nature. They have some maybe health issues, but instead of medical care, instead of proper medical assistance, we're just isolating them and keeping them away from other people. This led to stereotypes, definitely. That is why our messages now are to believe in these people. You have to believe in every person, to appreciate potential of any person, to ensure that there are conditions, proper conditions for their for them to have how we call autonomous life, so without any assistance, so that they are really the full members of our society. In fact, I just forgot one very small thing. One of fundamental directions of my work is also cooperation and work with the Artsakh human rights defender. This is our very important, let's say, function. With Mr. Artak Beglaryan, we do we implement very important projects. And I will not go, of course, into the details, but from my side, I must say that we are now involved in different international platforms, which provides us a possibility to bring the voice of Artsakh to these places. And moreover, we are now fighting there to make sure that human rights agencies, civil society from non-recognized territories, disputed territories, can have their participation, because this is all about human rights, and human rights are universal values. The main principle is that there is a status neutral, famous principle, according to which political status of a territory cannot affect human rights protection, because there we have women, we have children, we have persons with disabilities, and they also need protection. But because of lack of this protection, there are no effective international protection measures for people who live in Nagorno-Karabakh or in Artsakh.
So for those of us who have been to Artsakh, we know the meaning of the word frontier land. For me, when I go to Armenia, I'm excited to get there, but as soon as I get to Armenia, I can't wait to get to Artsakh. And I often tell my friends in Armenia that for Armenians living in Armenia, Artsakh must be a destination as much as Armenia is a destination for Armenians living outside of Armenia. But any Armenian that has gone to Armenia and has not made it to Artsakh has done himself or herself an incredible disservice. I know, because the first time they told me I was going to go on a 5-hour ride that took 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours, I lost count after so many stops and marveling at each and every symbol of our civilization, until I arrived at this majestic place and met people who truly seemed to be old souls. Didn't matter if they were 10 years old, or they were 30 years old, or 90 years old. Every one of them was an old soul, nurtured by that land and all the challenges that the land had presented to its people, by sheer virtue of its geographic location, due to no fault of the people that lived on that land for thousands of years. Well, I obtained permission to talk and share a story with you about the man who went at the Lachin corridor, current place known as Berzor, and did not come back home. The man who gave his life there, and he was only 41 years of age, leaving behind a wife and 3 sons. And not a year and a half later, when the youngest of these 3 sons was playing in the backyard with friends his own age, a friend discovers an object that piques the curiosity of this 6-year-old. And while he is observing what is to come of that object, the object blows up in the 6-year-old's face. The next 20 days, the 6-year-old, after being flown to Yerevan, fights for his life. Upon return to Artsakh, the mother holds his hands and walks him to school to start the school year. A year later, the now 7-year-old is brought to Yerevan to start a special school for those who cannot see. Graduates high school with honors. You can look up his biography. It's not about the studies of higher education in Yerevan or Greece or London or Fletcher School of Diplomacy that is most noteworthy, because what's most noteworthy is not on paper. What's most noteworthy is the attitude that lives in the soul, the spirit, the diminutive body, but the giant heart of our next speaker. Giant enough to climb Mount Ararat, all 5,165 meters of it, not in any other pace than the real pace of every mountain climber. Get there ahead of most, to see nothing, in his words. To see nothing, but to feel everything. To feel for the first time completely what it is to be an Armenian, looking at that vast terrain from the peak of all peaks, Mount Ararat. Why do I share this? I share this because we live in a land of plenty. We moan and groan about insignificant matters in our daily affairs. We bicker about, should we have an event in New York City, or should we be going to Armenia and Artsakh during that same designated period of time? We claim we are Armenians, but we are Armenians when it suits our needs, and we are Americans when it's to our best interest. It cannot be so. The Artsakhtsi has no choice. The Artsakhtsi wants no other choice. Our next speaker had plenty of opportunity, but he chose to return each and every time from wherever he was advancing himself to be a better Armenian, a more complete Armenian, only to return to Artsakh, whether it was to be the press secretary of the Prime Minister of Artsakh or the deputy human rights minister to our member Ruben Melikian the last several years, or whether it was, albeit in a secret vote, to be unanimously elected by Artsakh Parliament to be the human rights defender of Artsakh. He epitomizes that image that the glass is not half full, the glass is not half empty, the glass is overflowing. And I can tell you, all of this is all about a man who I always thought was a lot older until I got to know him and realize he's 30 years young. 30 years young, a dad, a husband, and an Armenian warrior in that frontier land that every one of us needs to put our own sweat and tears. I'm not talking about the blood. Artak, please, I know you want to come up and speak from the podium, so let me assist you for a second.
Yeah, sure. Together.
Yes.
And thanks to Arman, Mr. Tatoyan, also for the introduction on the Ombudsman Office, because actually I was going firstly to talk about, to introduce our Ombudsman Office, I mean Artsakh Ombudsman Office. But since Arman did that, actually there is no need, because we are very similar in case of our functions, our mandate, and no need to repeat the same thing. And the Ombudsman of Artsakh covers all the things, whatever the Armenian Ombudsman covers. The only difference is that we are not recognized. We haven't joined officially many international documents. We don't have some international responsibilities, let's say written responsibilities, unlike Armenia. The rest is the same. And also let me introduce a bit the legal system of the Artsakh Republic to know what kind of country we're talking about. Nowadays it's presidential system. The head of government is president. There is parliament, there is judicial system for sure. The rest is very similar to the Armenian one. We have also Supreme Court, including the Constitutional Palace. And the Ombudsman Office is an independent body. And it's very important to say that the Republic of Artsakh took responsibility to join the international documents unilaterally, regardless of our unrecognized status. We have joined, not ratified, but joined more than 10 of international documents, including the European Convention on Human Rights, Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the international covenants on civil and political rights, or social, economic, and cultural rights. But for sure, we also have some documents. For example, Convention on Children's Rights, on rights of persons with disabilities, the Convention Against Torture, etc. That recently I proposed our Parliament to consider joining to these documents, international documents. All right, and regarding the issues, we have some issues. It's next, the second slide.
Yeah.
On the second slide, you will see that there is a quote from the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, saying that should be no separation or discrimination on the basis of political, jurisdictional, and international status of any kind of country, territory, etc. But the reality is different. Even 70 years later, it's different because not only Artsakh, but also Artsakh is deprived, and let's say Artsakh people are deprived of many human rights because of the international status, our recognized status, and also because of the Azerbaijani policy, Azerbaijani aggressions, etc. Slide 3, please. We have, in my opinion, we have 3 dimensions of human rights violations and restrictions. The first dimension is domestic one. And we have many issues there, for sure. And it's, again, very similar to the Armenian case, with some differences. But because we are the same society, because we have the same mentality, the same thinking, values, traditions, that's why the system and the problems, the challenges are very similar. We have differences with international status and also the level of capacities of the state institutions and civil society. But there are those 2 problems, I mean institutions and civil societies. The problems are derived mostly from the international status because we are in isolation, and because of that, international isolation I mean, and because of that the civil society is not strong enough, unlike the Armenian one. The state institutions are not, in some cases, not always, in some cases are not strong enough in terms of capacities, unlike the Armenian one, because in the Armenian case there is international support, there is international contribution, not only in terms of resources, financial resources, but also human resources. But the challenges and the problems are very similar. And for me, one of the main problems is also the level of awareness. We need to work, firstly me, but also everyone, to work on this issue to improve the situation. Because it's the pillar of civil society, I would say. The second dimension is international community. As I said, because of the international status, we have many rights restricted and violated. And the third one is Azerbaijani direction or dimension, because the source of violations and restrictions is the Azerbaijani government, the Azerbaijani state. And in this presentation, I will present some cases from the second and third dimensions, international and Azerbaijani one. One day, once you are in Artsakh, we will discuss the first dimension. It would be your motivation, let's say. Fourth slide. We have 2 reasons, main reasons. The first reason is our recognized status of Artsakh Republic. The second reason is the Azerbaijani behavior, not institutional problems, legal problems, etc., but Azerbaijani state's behavior, policy, including Armenophobia or xenophobia against all Armenians, or hate speech in Azerbaijan at the state level. And the restrictions and violations which I'm going to present here are derived from those 2 reasons, main reasons. The next one, we have issues with freedom of movement from both sides, from Artsakh to abroad, from abroad to Artsakh. The first direction, the first side is from Artsakh to abroad, that we have problems with our passports. Since 1990s, we had local passports, Nagorno-Karabakh Republic passports, but those passports were not accepted by any country, and it caused many issues, many problems for us to travel internationally. And in the end of 90s, the president of Armenia, the government of Armenia, stated that Armenia is taking responsibility and is giving Armenian passports to all Artsakh citizens in order to guarantee the freedom of movement of all Armenians, including Artsakh Armenians. It's a solution, but it's not final solution for a country. I mean, for a separate state. Even with the Armenian passports, the Artsakh citizens have many issues, including issues relating to visa. Garo and Armenian Bar Association board members know that. Even I have sometimes issues, but it's very difficult to identify the issue and to prove that we are facing issues, obstacles regarding to our freedom of movement because of our origin of our recognized state. Because no embassy says that your visa is rejected because of your Artsakh citizenship, but in many cases, hiddenly, it's proven, it's shown, etc. And these kind of problems, they are not only problems of freedom of movement, but also they are causing human rights violations in terms of right to health, right to education, etc. For example, I know many cases when Artsakh citizens apply to embassies for visa to get some medical treatment abroad, but they didn't give visa. And also I know that, for example, I know some cases a student from Artsakh got accepted to, for example, King's College of the UK, and had all the scholarship funding, but the embassy rejected to give visa, etc., etc. Next slide, yeah. Freedom of movement from abroad to Artsakh, it's relating mostly to foreigners who are visiting Artsakh and supporting Artsakh. All of you probably know that there is a blacklist of Azerbaijan, and all the foreigners, whoever are known, public figures, journalists, I don't know, political figures, etc., who visit Artsakh, they are included in the blacklist of Azerbaijan. It's their job, actually. And this blacklist bans all those foreigners to visit Azerbaijan, but also the Azerbaijani government prosecutes all those public figures with propaganda and political tools. There were some cases in a few years that they tried the legal tool also to criminalize the visit. They started a criminal case against 3 European Parliament members, it's nonsense, who visited Artsakh, but those criminal cases didn't pass the border of Azerbaijan because Interpol rejected to put those names in the list of internationally wanted people. And that's why in the recent, I guess, 2 years, Azerbaijan doesn't try to put some legal pressure on Artsakh visitors. It's only a political issue and propaganda issue for us. The next slide, right to communication. We have some issues with communication too. Whoever visited Artsakh from this hall, they know, and Gara also told about that there is no airport and you have to drive from Yerevan to Artsakh. Average 5 hours takes from that driving. And it's a problem of freedom of movement and communication, right to communication too. Because we want to have airport, we want to have international communication, but also Armenian communication. Some easy communication which will make its effect some additional effects, impacts on economy, on some political life, civil life, etc. And a few years ago, in 2009, the Artsakh government started to build, not build actually, renovate the airport of Stepanakert, which had been operating until 1991, 1992. And the government said that we were going to reoperate the airport. We got an airplane to have flights from Yerevan to Stepanakert and vice versa. And the Azerbaijani government, including defense minister and president, publicly, officially said that they were going to shoot down all the airplanes flying on the Karabakh sky, including civilian airplanes. And it was a shock for us. Unfortunately, I guess it wasn't a shock for international mediators. Probably they expected such kind of reaction. But until now, by now, we have not succeeded to operate our airport. It's a matter of rights, human rights. It's a matter of freedom of movement, and I guess it's the issue of international community too, because our rights, our basic rights, fundamental rights are not protected here. We also have another issue of mobile operators, because Azerbaijan publicly and not publicly persecutes many international foreign mobile operators not to cooperate with the Artsakh mobile operator, not to have mutual roaming in Artsakh and abroad too, and in some cases they succeeded. There are some examples that because of the Azerbaijani pressure, foreign mobile operators stopped cooperation with the Artsakh mobile operator. The next one, the next slide, is it's a conditional right actually. I created that right in order to combine some rights, some cases. Right to recognition of civil registration and educational documents. Actually, there are reasons, or there are the basis of other violations of other human rights. For example, civil registration documents, including marriage certificate, birth certificate, and others, are not recognized but by other countries, by foreign countries. And because of that, many rights of our people, our citizens, are not protected, are violated. But it's very hard to identify all the cases and to understand how we can help them, but there is such kind of issue. Another problem is diploma recognition. Because we are unrecognized, international organizations, including European Union and other organizations, and also the recognized countries don't recognize our diplomas. And because of that, we have rights of education, but also some work rights violated and restricted abroad. Because, for example, in the USA, someone from Karabakh having Karabakh University a diploma wants to have job, they require, I don't know, quality or qualification or diploma. If they show an Artsakh diploma, they can't accept, they don't accept. Usually they don't accept the diplomas. It's about the accepting some foreign, not some, probably all the foreign universities. There are some exclusions with Karabakh diplomas, for example, doing master there. The next one, right to economic development. We have many issues here, but I listed 3 of them. The first one, let's speak about water resources. The Sarsang case, Sarsang Reservoir case. Probably you have heard about Sarsang Reservoir that we have in Artsakh, and it was built during the Soviet time, and it was a source of irrigation water during the Soviet time for over 100,000 hectares agricultural lands in Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast and in Soviet Azerbaijan too. And 80% of those water resources were going to Azerbaijan, 20% to Karabakh lands. After the war, Azerbaijan controls the channel, a hub on the channel on this reservoir. The reservoir is under our control completely, but the channel partially is under control of Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan always, by now, blames the Armenian side, but de facto the Artsakh government, not to give water resources to the Azerbaijani lands, and saying that the Azerbaijanis are deprived of their basic rights to economic development because of the occupant regime. And it's nonsense, for me at least, because since the beginning of 2000s, the government of Artsakh Republic publicly, officially, and also diplomatically through diplomatic channels, proposed the Azerbaijani government to open the channel in order to use the water resources of the Sarsang Reservoir together. Once they open the channel, they will get water resources for over 80,000 hectares, and we will get for over 20,000 hectares. But they don't agree. And because of this position, not only our, but also their citizens are deprived of having irrigation on their lands. And just for you, in order to understand what kind of resource it means for us, 20,000 hectares lands are 25% of our agricultural lands in Karabakh. It means that once we have water on those territories, on those lands, it will have a huge effect on our economy and on our social life. The second issue is that Azerbaijan persecutes the importers and exporters to and from Karabakh. We have some products exporting to both European and non-European post-Soviet countries, but also some products to the US too. But once the Azerbaijani government and the Azerbaijani communities know about that, they make noise, at least. They make pressure politically, diplomatically, in order to stop selling Artsakh products. For sure, we have found some solutions. I'll not speak about that. It's a secret. But due to that secret, actually the Azerbaijani government has many issues, difficulties to identify the Artsakh products abroad. But they also persecute the importers and foreign companies and investors working in Karabakh. Again, with propaganda and political tools, but in some cases there are criminal cases, like I said before about the freedom of movement, and it didn't work again, and now they stopped that method. And because of that, we lost lots of investments. I know more than 10 of companies, foreign companies, which came to Artsakh, invested there, but because of the Azerbaijani blackmail, propaganda, political pressure, etc., they stopped working in Artsakh. And now also we are getting smarter, and we hide such kind of cases in order not to make them a target of Azerbaijani aggression. Next, what we can do. It's call to action for all of us, call to action for all people, including Armenians and non-Armenians, foreigners, who share the values and the background of Artsakh people. I guess in this all of us share that because of our Armenian origin too, actually, but with a stronger background that we share the values. And I guess that none of us has the right to turn a blind eye to all those issues. Only I have the ability to turn a blind eye, but I don't do that. And if I don't do that, in that case, none of you shouldn't do that. That's why my urge, my call is that let's think how we can help our compatriots in Artsakh. I think we have many ways, and many of you did that, do that, but it's very important to have a combined, to have a joint power, to work together. In that case, we will solve many other issues together. Thank you. That's all, Garo. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Artak. And thank you, Arman. I'm going to turn it over for questions. I can ask a ton of questions, but I'm not. Any questions from the audience? Oh, yes.
I have a question regarding like the pre and the post of your office. The pre, obviously, there's always a lot of fear involved in coming forward with a complaint. And you talked about going ahead and raising awareness as part of the function of your office. I would assume that would be also part of it. What else, is that part of the function of your office to make it the climate to allow for people to come forward to make complaints, individuals as you mentioned, or other people to come forward? And my post question regarding your, what gives your positions some teeth? Meaning, how are these violations of human rights enforced?
I'm assuming your question is for either one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Arman? Artak? One at a time.
All right. I'm sorry, just I want to know your name because you know my name. All right, Danush, thank you. Actually, I didn't get completely your second question, but I will answer the first one, then we'll go to the second one. The first question, the answer is that, first of all, raising awareness is the best tool in order to urge people or help support people to come to our office and complain. But for sure it takes time, both awareness but also in parallel with raising awareness, we build trust towards our office. If people don't trust to any kind of institution, they will not complain. And if they complain, they will not have full expectations. It depends on us. If we work properly, if we don't turn a blind eye to human rights violations, in that case, gradually we will build a trust. We have some trust, it's not enough, frankly saying. I would prefer to see much more trust towards our office, but it's up to me, firstly. And I'm going to do my best in the upcoming period to build the trust more and more, and also to raise awareness about among people in order to give them methodology and mechanisms how they can protect their human rights even without ombudsman, because many problems are coming from lack of awareness. That's all. For the second question, if it's possible, please repeat that, or Mr. Tatoyan will.
I'm sorry, there seems to be a concern that there were two parts to your question.
The pre-part of it, you just answered the post regarding like putting teeth in the findings or their.
Yes.
Given what we heard at lunch.
Recommendations. Firstly, it's up to the law. I mean, the law says that the decisions of ombudsman is advisory, but it's based on authority. The practice shows that once we have decision, we send a decision to any kind of institution, for example, executive one. In that case, they do the decision, if it's not a deadlock. Secondly, even before making decisions, we have contact with the responsible institution, let's say ministry, and we say that solve this issue. We identify that you violated this man's human rights. In most cases, they do that, even without final decision. And there is another direction that we have a mandate of contributing to improvement of human rights legislation. Once we detect any kind of issue in the legislation, we can make recommendations. We can make proposals to the government and to the parliament to amend the law or any kind of legal act. And mostly there is no problem, there is no serious resistance by ministries, because there is a political will at the parliament and at the government to cooperate with ombudsman and also to protect human rights.
Thank you. I will start with the first question on the awareness raising. This is awareness raising or lack of information. Very important question. That is why one of the fundamental parts of my work is awareness raising, human rights promotion, in other words, or preventive work. The accreditation that we got from United Nations office stated that the very important thing with our institution is that we very often go on public, and we, from protective, we turn to be promotion human rights institution to prevent violations in the future. the European Union conducted a comprehensive study. According to these results of this is a published document. They assessed the level of trust of the population in all institutions in the country, and it appeared that based on all criteria, our institution is number one. So we enjoy. This is published on the website of the European Union. And the USAID-funded Caucasian Barometer they conducted a study, compared trust in judiciary and in our institution. Trust in our judiciary is twice bigger than in judiciary, than in courts, according to the study again conducted. This is also, right now, there is our reputation is growing and growing. For example, it is connected to the events of the last year, honestly, because it helps us to raise the visibility of our institution, because actually we were working with the whole nation. There were even the biggest demonstrations from which the leaders of the opposition were praising our institution, and people were applauding. 400,000 people, 500,000 people, which really happened regularly, which really helped us, and people could see that we are with them always, trying to help them. Last year's complaints were 3 times higher, the volume, than the year before. We had even months, for example, July of last year, compared to July 2017, complaints were 10 times higher, the number of complaints. It is connected to the trust, but it's also connected to the expectations that we have in the country now. Very high expectations, especially when transitional justice is announced, etc. People have they keep the case files that they had, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, closed cases. But still they keep it with the hope that someday some door will be opened. And now, due to these changes of the last year, they come to, and the whole government is under this pressure with the huge volume of cases. Anyway, there are legislative guarantees to protect people who apply to us. We keep always the confidentiality. This is task number 1, very important. We always keep the confidentiality. All incoming calls to my office, there is a 24 hours operating hotline. I established a system which records all calls. They are highly protected with passwords. Very limited number of people have access to these recordings. And we also keep which is very important, due to the guarantees that I provided, to the prohibition to question our staff members, etc. It highly raised. And one more thing, I very often visit regions myself, my staff and me. It is on one hand it is a problem because we take more and more complaints, but on the other hand it is very important because we try to raise the awareness, we take the complaints, and we engage with the people to see what are the real issues that the country faces. Now, about the implementation of recommendation. I would divide my recommendations into 2 parts, 2 levels. Recommendations of individual nature, let's say individual measures, and general measures, like the European Court of Human Rights does, for example. All my decisions, they are developed based on the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. And there we have individual measures, so measure for the applicant, and general measure. So this is a measure directed at the improvement of the legal system, so that we prevent violation of the rights of people who may appear in a similar situation. When it comes to individual measure, I have the right to request criminal prosecution. This is a mandatory thing for the public prosecution authorities to launch to start investigation based on my application. I have the right then to later request all case files, everything, and I have the highest level of access to all secret files, even if this is some secret case file, I don't know. This is also due to the guarantee that no one can question me. Everything stays there. And a very important thing is also my recommendation let's say on the police violations, if this is of disciplinary nature, is a mandatory ground to launch a disciplinary proceeding against a police officer. The third, and which is again the next one, which is again very important, I may offer concrete measure of disciplinary liability against an official. I assess, as the human rights defender, the nature of violation, the severity of the violation, and I propose a concrete form, let's say to fire the officer or to impose some fine if this is allowed. Of course, police authority or some other authority, they may overrule, let's say, or reject my request, but then they have the obligation, they have the burden to show to me what was the reason for them not to implement it. And I must say that the important thing also with our institution, very unique thing, and this is a result of huge fight with our authorities, of previous authorities by the way, our decisions are not applicable to the courts. No one can appeal against us to the courts, because these are not administrative acts. We have other tools, let's say. And by the way, I must say that the best, let's say, period for our development of our institution are 2016 and 2017, when we totally reformed the whole legal system. Our law. When it comes to the recommendations of general nature, this is, you have here to work, first of all, with the parliament. Our institution is a very unique institution worldwide. I have permanent representatives, one in the parliament, the other one in the constitutional court. So it gave me a possibility to enhance, to strengthen institutional ties between these institutions. So let's say if I see some preventive measure, the need for some preventive measure, I may apply to the Constitutional Court. If I see the need to shape the judicial practice, I have the possibility to apply to the Supreme Judicial Council on the improvement of concrete of judicial practice on concrete matter. I also have the right to develop legal acts, laws, draft laws, and to send them to government, to parliament. They have the direct obligation to start specific process of examining my proposals, offers, in the form of concrete draft laws. And since I have excellent, I think, with all of the parties, this is also the advantage of the ombudsman. You have to work with everyone. You have to work with the government to solve issues. You know, when I was, if I may just for 1 minute, when I was nominated to be elected to this position, I was a Deputy Minister of Justice. I was studying here at Penn, and I received an offer. I went and I commenced my duties. When they nominated me for the Ombudsman, there was a huge criticism. You may have heard that this is a Deputy Minister of Justice, they will destroy the institution, and this is, I don't know, it will be in line with the government, etc. When I commenced my duties, I had the great possibility to to do populistic things, to criticize all the time the government, to say how bad they are and how good, I am, and what I'm a good guy, they're bad guys, and this could contribute to the very fast, quick increase of my reputation. But in long-term perspective, it would lead to nowhere, because as an ombudsman, you have to work with all parties, you have to be equally trusted by all of them, civil society and the government. That is why I decided to be professional, as professional as I can, and to directly work with all parties. Because if I praise the government, then civil society will say, look, why we need you? We have the government and we can criticize, we know how the government works. If I keep praising, keep doing the populism, then it will be a problem with the government and all the way around. So that is why we keep this very important way of working. And what I also do, I have the right to participate in government sittings, for example, which is very important. And if some sensitive issue arises, I always express my voice, and I must say that the government always, and the Prime Minister himself, by the way, I had the possibility to see this. They always follow my advice, which is very important. And by the way, we are also a mandatory part of a legal reform process. So whatever is drafted in Armenia, they can't adopt it without my expertise, which is also at the institutional level, helps us to be involved in all areas. And I signed also contracts with educational institutions, with Academy of Justice, with Police Academy, with Chamber of Advocates School, etc., and at some other universities. When they develop their human rights curricula, they use my reports. And they invite my staff members as guest lecturers when they have human rights issues. So again, it helps very, let's say, this is a very important tool that helps you to be at the core of these processes. So these are the answer is that individual, you have to divide them into individual measures and general measures.
Any other questions? Yes, Ike.
Dr. Tatoyan and Dr. Beglaryan, my question is related to an issue that was mentioned by Dr. Tatoyan, but I'd welcome responses from both of you. You briefly addressed the efforts regarding women's rights and domestic violence, but I'm curious about the current reality also with respect to religious minorities and the LGBT community and efforts to address these issues on a systemic level.
These are very important topics, highly debated, I would say heated sometimes topics. So the first one, and let me just very briefly say right now that, before turning to the details, that every institution in our country is entitled to protect all people's rights. I mean, all groups of the society, regardless of their race, etc., religion. When it comes to religious rights, here we are very active. We have very active cooperation with the church. And by the way, when we protect women's rights and to try to work towards the prevention of domestic violence, we also cooperate with the church here. We recognize the unique, very exclusive nature of our church, Armenian Apostolic Church. It is also enshrined in our constitution, the unique relations and the unique role of our church in the history of our nation. And we do appreciate this role. And I have regular meetings with Armenian Catholicos, with other members of the church, with archbishops, and this is an important, let's say, mechanism of cooperation. But I also do cooperate with other religious organizations, and my task is to protect their rights as well, of course. When I was a Deputy Minister of Justice, I was a member of a special commission who was in charge of exempting or deciding the issue of exemption of conscripts from military service based on their religious ground. So let's say Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. And based on this, on my experience, I very well know the specific features, let's say, of different religious organizations and their goals, their rights, etc. So here we very actively work with them. Very soon Armenia is going to adopt a new law on religious organizations. Here we have some debates. Some international organizations, for example, offer that our church must be as equal as other religious organizations, and there should not be any discrimination, because they consider, for example, in terms of taxes or customs fees, the same should be applied also to other religious organizations and other things. And we are very much looking forward, let's say, in that sense, saying to these discussions, because we expect that more debates, heated debates, will come up. When it comes to the other group, the LGBTI, here we almost receive, honestly, the number of complaints that we receive is very low, very low. It's like up to 10 per year. It doesn't matter, anyone, if they apply to us, we are active, we protect everyone's rights, as any other institution in our country. We also help other state institutions to be active in these areas, and we do cooperate with each other, regardless of the matter of the fact how sensitive the issue is. And we have a specific chapter in our report, annual report, that I'm submitting to the Parliament, related to all issues, including the group of people that you just mentioned.
One second, let me just have Artak reflect on that, and then I'll take Ani your question, and maybe one last question after that.
All right. Thank you, Ike. For religious minorities, the reality is different from Armenia for two reasons. The first reason is Armenia is Council of Europe and has direct responsibilities to make concrete steps in this area. The second difference is security, because Artsakh is actually the first subject and object of the conflict, and war is not impossible, let's say. That's why those two factors affect the religious minorities' rights. Recently, 2 months ago, I made some proposals, amendments in the law. Now there is a debate in the parliament and also in the civil society on this law on rights to religion, etc. But until now, there are some religious minorities, some organizations in Artsakh, they work normally without any serious problem in their daily life. But the main problem is registration of religious minorities organizations. What kind of status they should have and what kind of procedures they should pass, etc. But in reality, de facto, there is no serious reason, there is no serious issue, except for the issues relating to serving in the army. Because that's why I say that there is a security problem. And in the debate, whatever I said about the executive power and many organizations say that we have a security issue and we shouldn't give them the right not to serve in the army. They should be equal, otherwise it should be a national security problem for us. And second, for LGBT rights, actually we got 0 complaints, not only during my time, but during the rest of time, since 2008, since the establishment of the institution. And we didn't have any kind of chance to explore the issue. And I have not heard about such kind of issues, frankly. But I don't know. It doesn't mean that there is a problem or there is no problem.
Thank you. Ani, and then I'll take you. 1 second. Go ahead, Ani.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I wanted to know how large your offices are, how large your staff is. And in the case of Armenia, because it is an internationally recognized and supported institution, I assume you have more financial support. So I wanted to know, who funds this other than the government? For both of you, in the case of Artsakh, it seems because there's so much outside the Azerbaijani and other international non-recognition and aggression of those areas, that you need more support. So where does your support come from? And also, for people who travel to Artsakh and have an Artsakh stamp, can they use that same passport to go to Turkey, or will Turkey reject them, like Azerbaijan will?
Our institution don't laugh. The budget is 100,000 USD. We have 13 employees. It's very small. I think it's very small because there is lots of job to do domestically and externally. But it's our resources. I mean, our resources are very limited. And the second problem is that we don't have international support, unlike the Armenian institution. Mr. Tatoyan will say about that. We don't have international organizations as contributors, supporters. We have only very small cases, diaspora organizations supporting Armenian Bar Association. In some small projects we cooperated, including financially and in terms of human resources. Also, for example, David and Anahit are here. They had an internship last summer in our office, and they contributed to our office. AGBU supported and now supports with small projects, and Tufenkian Foundation supported. I'm talking about financial support. But we need lots of support, not only financial, but also human resources. That's all? All right, thanks.
Well, now my office, we have about no more than 100 people, staff members, 3 regional offices, one in Shirak, second one is in Sunik, third one is in Geghar-Konik region. Right before coming to Los Angeles, I had a meeting with the government special sitting, and we agreed additional funds will be allocated to our office to create another one in Tavush. In Tavush there is an urgent need to have a regional office, because when Azerbaijan conducts shootings towards Armenian civilian settlements, I always conduct their civil fact-finding mission, and we then prepare a report. Usually these are in English and French, and we submit to international partners. The important thing with our office is that last year I pushed the government, in 2017, they adopted 2 government decisions with which they allowed us to have an extra budget line on which we can receive funds from international organizations. These are usually not that big, about 10% of our total budget, but this is of course all in all a state-funded institution. But we keep our independence. So there was a procedure before 2016 when we had to get our permission, in some cases from the Ministry of Finance, for example, when we tried to allocate some of the money to spend them. But we changed the system, and now we just let them know post factum about our decisions, my decisions, let's say, the human rights defender. And moreover, I remember very clearly, when I was at the Ombudsman's office working for 6-7 years, all my predecessors had the problem when the government tried to cut the budget for the next year. That is why, for the upcoming year, that is why, at the level of constitutional law, we adopted a very important provision which helps us now to keep the independence, that our budget for the next year cannot be lower than the budget of the previous year, which is very important guarantee for us. Our experience now is being invested and studied about in 10 countries of the world: Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. They applied, by the way, to the Council of Europe on their own initiative to come and to study our experience. Bulgarians very soon are coming to Armenia, Serbia. These are our partners, and it helps us also to keep our reputation inside the country. When they see that you have relations with international partners, as I told you in my speech, then they are very careful with you, especially in the situation that we have now in the country. This is very sensitive and important. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We're running out of time. People with higher ranks than me are giving me signals, so please, I'm going to ask the responses to be brief. Go ahead.
Alice Yardom Hunter. I'm an immigration lawyer. I just wanted to mention that there are asylum cases in the U.S. out of Armenia in the LGBT community. So I think that
I know about this. We have this information. We have the information also. I will not go to individual cases, of course, because this is not my mandate probably, but we have also cases when people went
especially to European countries. They claim to be, let's say, people belonging to LGBTI group, but in reality they don't belong to this group, or let's say it is not approved, and later they are deported to Armenia. And generally, when it comes to asylum, this is also one of my main directions of work. And by the way, we are now trying to develop a new function. This is monitoring of return flights. So now we're cooperating with our European partners to see how we can start this new function. So when our citizens are deported to Armenia, to monitor so that there is no ill treatment from the side of law enforcement authorities of other countries.
Okay, thank you once again, Arman and Artak. Let's give a round of applause for these two. I have been empowered to say that the afternoon session has ended. I hope I see all of you at the gala event at 6:30 p.m. at the California Club. Thank you very much for your attention and participation.